Hey there, I'm Samma with Samma Says, here to talk about our tabletop role-playing games collection at the Palm Harbor Library. This has kind of been my baby for the past year and a half or so, and it's something I'm very, very passionate about, almost as passionate as I am about interactive theater and Temenos and all that jazz. So if you've read any of my blog posts or seen any of my other broadcasts for work, you might have heard this concept, and you can go back and look at like Interplay or my blog and find out more about that. But I want to just kind of focus on the tabletop RPGs. This is going to be something I cover in 2 different blog posts on my blog, Interplay at the Library. But I was hoping maybe if I kind of tried to squeeze it all in as best I could into words, and having the actual visuals next to me might be a good resource for anyone who was too long didn't read on my blog post, though it might still wind up being a rather long video. So the idea for the collection really came about because I have loved D&D for a very, very long time. I have been playing tabletop games for 21 years now. My mother taught me for my 8th birthday how to play Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Soon after the 3rd edition came out, and me and my friends loved to play during middle school on Sundays, and it was a blast. And I think it's a really great hobby for anyone to have, young or old, because it encourages so many great things. You have, reading comprehension. You have, as you can see, these books can be pretty thick. You don't have to, oops, I'm pulling one out of frame. These books can be pretty thick, and rather text dense. And you really don't have to read the whole thing, but the more you read, the better chance you have of understanding it fully. You don't have to reference it as often. So there's that. There's also a little bit of math. You get more of the math trying to figure out the best ways to build a character. So I think beyond the math and the literacy that seems to be a little bit more apparent, there's a lot of other skills you pick up from this. There are, finding creative solutions to problems. I know I've always worked with dungeon masters and game masters who give more experience for finding ways besides fighting to solve a problem, and I love that. And it's something you can encourage people to do. You have a lot of control over these where you don't have any control really over most video games, or a lot of board games even. You can also learn different public speaking skills. I know most of my public speaking skills and acting chops came from playing tabletop and having the safe place to explore different characters and that sort of thing. It also made me more confident. That might be a kind of case-by-case basis, but it's just such a safe place to try new things. And I really love that. And if you've ever, been to my blog, Interplay at the Library, read any of those posts, or seen any of my other work broadcasts about Temenos or Safe Play Space, that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. So I think it's a great hobby, but unfortunately it's also a rather expensive hobby. You'll see that a lot of the books, like this is fairly cheap for a book this size from a, proper publisher. $30 for a single book, and you normally need, like with D&D, you need the 3 core books. Other games, you might only need 1 or 2 books, and they might be less expensive, but maybe you don't know if you're going to like the game or not, and you don't want to kind of invest until you're sure. And not only are there books to buy, it's behind me, there's also dice to consider, all this other paraphernalia that you could work with, not necessarily have to. So there's all sorts of things you kind of have to keep in mind, and this hobby becomes very, very expensive because of that. And I remember growing up seeing 1 or 2 RPG books in my local library system that I could have, shipped over from a different library. Our library had one, but they were few and far between. They were only for Dungeons and Dragons. I think there was 1 World of Darkness book available, and they wound up going missing, and the libraries didn't replace them. So I had a little bit of resistance when I first proposed this idea, but they gave me the young adult collection to take over. So when they did that, I asked if I could also have a little bit of money to work on this collection as well, and they said okay. So I'm going to try and go over some step-by-step how I started the collection, what I do with it, how I keep it going, and if this works for your library, great. If you need a smaller version of the program, also great. You can kind of tailor it to your own needs. Or if you go to a library, you don't actually work at one, and you want to show the librarian something that, hey, this is viable, you can send them towards this video or to my blog posts. So purchasing, first and foremost, you need things to put on the shelves. Our collection is a mix of these kind of more mainstream items like World of Darkness, Pathfinder, Dungeons & Dragons, and independently published items such as Our Last Best Hope, A lot of these games were originally funded on, say, Kickstarter or other crowdfunding websites, and I buy a lot of these through Indie Press Revolution. So any book I have purchased from Indie Press Revolution has a nice little book plate. Indie Press Revolution was great. I emailed them, they emailed me right back. They worked with me to get a discount going. They send me the new lists every week. They work with me as if I was a bookseller selling these items, and it's fantastic. So I would definitely, if you're thinking about getting less mainstream items for your collection, send them an email, talk to them, or you can talk to other places like DriveThruRPG, or even some of the big publishers. I've recently gotten into contact with, I can never remember how to pronounce their actual name, Paizo. I never remember where the I goes in that. I've recently started talking to Paizo via email, and I don't know where that's going to go just yet, but I'm very excited. So I would also suggest emailing just anyone you can think of. The worst they can do is say no, or, just not get back to you, but that's okay. So my initial purchase was from Amazon, and then I went into Indie Press Revolution. Kind of look around, see what your best options are. There were some things that were cheaper on Amazon and some things that were cheaper through various print-on-demand websites. So I have freedom with my collection, and I also have extensive background knowledge of a lot of these games. I've been playing for 21 years. If you haven't been and you're trying to develop this collection, look for top 5 or top 10 best games to get into to kind of give a jump start to your collection, or see if there's a local gaming store or if there's any gamers who come into your library who want to help you cultivate this collection. Beyond just purchases, I've also gotten several donations. I got one really big donation that was fantastic of a lot of these older D&D books and various supplements for D&D. The same person also gave me a lot of supplements for, Warhammer, not World of Warcraft. So if you're kind of open about the fact that you've got this collection, you might wind up getting donations. Some of my friends wound up donating to the collection. I donated to the collection. I had a lot of items that I knew I wasn't ever going to play, despite the fact that I loved them and wanted them. So I figured I'd put them out here and see if maybe other people would also love them. And they would actually get played, which is, nice for a game. I also get some from used bookstores, especially for the older World of Darkness books that are no longer in print and are kind of expensive used on Amazon. I just keep an eye out on my local used bookstore because they have a tabletop RPG collection against one of the walls. So shop around, see what's in your area. If you could only work with like Amazon and Indie Press or Amazon and DriveThruRPG, it's a great place to start. And just getting started is one of the most important parts of this. And if you are going to offer the books, you might also consider offering the various accessories that go with the game, such as dice. I have different sets of dice. I've got D20s, polyhedral sets, D6 sets, depending on what each item needs. I also have a Jenga tower for the game Dread, because that's what that needs. And I just kind of look at each game and see what it requires. Some games require decks of cards, which I offer. Some games require tokens, which I don't offer. But I also let people know that they could use pebbles or pennies or whatever they have lying around. So you might want to consider that as part of your purchase if you have a specific budget to spend. I have spent about $1,100 in this collection since December of 2015. We currently have 107 different rulebooks and 79 collections of dice, cards, the Jenga tower, etc., etc. These are numbers I always forget, so I had to print them out. So before the books can make it to the shelf, they have to be cataloged. I go a slightly extra step with each item, so when I get them in, I will browse them if I don't know them, read them as best I can, especially the chapter about making characters and the DM's chapter to see what's necessary, and I will make book plates. There we go. That go over various bits of information, such as the genre, the number of players it works for, how much time you normally have to spend on it. Some games are campaign-based, some games are one-shots, so I'll go over that in here. I'll also go over a quick summary of the game, and I'll rate the rule system, a difficulty between 1 and 5, the story depth as a difficulty between 1 and 5, and then the overall difficulty between 1 and 5. I like this because there's going to be people who have never played before, and I did leave them a nice little note for whenever I'm not here, telling them that if they're not entirely sure and they've never played before and they want a good place to start, to just sort of browse through, flip to the opening of each book, and see which ones have a lower rule difficulty, a lower overall difficulty, and fit a genre that they like. This is especially important for our collection for whenever I'm not around. I'm full-time, so I'm usually here. But if I'm not here and our other gamers, we have 2 other people who game extensively and a couple other people who have gamed before. If none of them are around, I wanted to make it easy for my coworkers to be able to help people pick out books. So after I do that, I decide if a game is appropriate for all ages or if it's more appropriate for older teens and beyond. If it's good for all ages, I will put a young adult sticker on it. I don't put the juvenile sticker on it, but the all YA items are normally in our adult nonfiction collection anyway. So I figured it was a good way of going, hey, this one's a little bit more, kid-friendly. So as you can see, I kind of have a good half and half with the collection, what's good for everyone, and what's a little more advanced or covers deeper, darker material. Those I won't put the sticker on. And you kind of slowly learn which game companies are more apt to put out kid-friendly games. Third Eye Games is fantastic. They have a really easy system called the PIP system. Then what happens next is we put a green TRPG sticker that I designed on it. I keep pointing at a screen. So you can see that here. That makes it easier for people to kind of pick it out of wherever it is. And it makes it easy for me when it gets misshelved in the regular nonfiction collection to pull it out and put it where it belongs. So every item is cataloged with game as part of the call number. It has a separate section, and it has that green symbol, because we weren't using green paper for anything at that point in time. And it helps the shelvers identify that this is not one that's going to be going into the general section. It's going to go into this special collection, which also has... lift this up slightly. A nice green sign. Oh no! Stand by for me to fix this. Close enough. I will say for the record that our cataloger kind of hates me for making him do 95% original cataloging, because a lot of other libraries just don't have these items on their shelves. Sometimes he's able to find something in WorldCat to base his records off of, but I feel like at least half the time he doesn't. If I had a chance to overhaul this just a little bit, the one thing I would change is the fact that a lot of these are call number game 793.93 and then the first 3 letters of the author's name, and do into the first 3 letters of the system's name. So we have that with Dungeons & Dragons. They are all game 793.93 DUN, and the Fates are FAT, and a couple others like Pathfinder's PAT, but then you get World of Darkness, which is WHI, or these 2 games that go together, Do Pilgrims of the Flying Temple and Do Fate of the Flying Temple, which were by 2 different authors and 2 different game developers, and both put out by the same publisher, but one is under SOL as the author's last name, and one is under TRU as the author's last name. Just luckily, they are close enough that they get to be put together. So that's one thing I would change, and one thing I would suggest thinking about when you're starting the collection, because it's easier to fix that earlier on. Also, because they have game as their title, it's easy for patrons to see, oh, that's not in the normal place, and if they're not sure where it is, they can go and ask for where it is. The other thing we have are dice, which are cataloged under dice and ask at adult services for the items. And this box is heavy. I'm going to try and pull it up enough to show, This is in our drawer. It's a repurposed cash drawer. And I have them separated out into percentile sets, D20 sets and pip sets, fate sets, D6 sets, and polyhedral sets. As I kind of get more and more games, I might have to redo how some of those are done. But for now, this works. I get little jewelry bags and put the dice in there. They get their call number. Each record states how many dice should be in it. And when they get returned, they get given back to me, so I check and make sure everything's where it should be. There are some weird ones, like this is a deck of cards specifically for a game. And so I've got listed how many cards there should be, and all that jazz to make it easier to count when it gets back. So, all of our dice. So all of those items are kept inside one of our drawers. I also have, for all of my coworkers who are not into gaming, There is both the fact that in the book plate, one thing I forgot was it will say materials needed, basic materials. Oops. Basic materials. And it'll say whether or not those items are available for checkout. So anything that's got an asterisk next to it, we have at our desk to check out. And it'll tell them what kind of items they need. I also have a cheat sheet for my coworkers that tells them which game it is, what kind of dice set they need, and it'll be based on what the item record says. I also have a brief visual guide to dice, because I know that for people who haven't been playing, D20 doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's basic setup, and I want to go over a couple more things. I noticed this was going to be a long video, and it's very much turning into a long video. That was the first blog post I have done. The second blog post isn't done just yet, but I'm going to go over what I'm going to be going over in it. So one of the things I also do, along with having dice available, is having these massive folders available, there's 3 of them, that have different printables. Because again, when I'm trying to go over the fact that some people have access issues to this expensive hobby, that can also include printing. And while it's possible to get, sheets of paper, write out the different aspects of a character sheet, sometimes character sheets are designed in such a specific way that you kind of need the actual character sheet. And a lot of times it's just nice to have them. So each of these has a table of contents saying what's inside it, and tells you which section number it's under. So I've got all sorts of different tabs. And it's just got a then page protector full of whatever sheet it is that they need. And they can take one sheet if they need it, or multiple sheets if they need it. All I say is that they see it kind of starting to dwindle. There's only 1 or 2 left to let me know so I can print more. So this system is really, really important for games based on the Powered by the Apocalypse system, because a lot of those have character sheets that are already partially filled out. So I'm going to pull out one of these. This is from Spirit of 77. So as you can see, there's a lot of information on this character sheet. And one of the fun things about Powered by the Apocalypse games is that they're very great starter games because you don't have as much customization options. Now, that can kind of be a drawback, but you can make a lot of the personality your own, but a lot of the character design is already done. So it's kind of a great jumping off point. But again, really important to be able to have all that information, and so I really like being able to provide these character sheets for them. So those go on their own separate shelf. I'm not going to move that webcam again. But they're on the bottom shelf, and they say on the spine which games they cover. So that's the collection as it currently stands. Again, I have a lot of items. I get a lot of teens coming in asking for Dungeons & Dragons, and I try to steer them towards, here are the D&D books, but also have you considered, if you like fantasy, trying the Lord of the Rings book, or if you like the Final Fantasy games, this Ryutama game that is based very much like a Japanese RPG. Now, whenever I'm not here, they don't have quite that same level of reader's advisory for tabletop games, but a lot of my coworkers encourage them to come back and talk with me afterwards. I've tried to make a very diverse collection of different game types. There's obviously a lot of fantasy and urban fantasy because that's what a lot of tabletop RPGs are. But I have ones based on different historical events. Night Witches is great. It's based in World War II. It's based on the Night Bomber Regiment of natural-born Soviet airwomen. And it gives their story in a way that's a lot easier to absorb than a history book. And a lot of history books just don't go over them at all. But not only is it a great look at a forgotten part of history and a great way of absorbing that history, but it also goes over a lot of feminist elements, and I think it's a really great game. And I've got a couple of games like that. I've got games based on historical events. I've got games based on just being a normal high school kid trying to solve mysteries, a la, Nancy Drew or Veronica Mars. So I try to cover as many different things as possible for people who maybe aren't the biggest fan of fantasy. I've got more realistic games. I've got science fiction games, which were a little bit harder for me to find because it's not my cup of tea. But I went around and found as many good ones as I could. So I think having a very diverse collection to kind of try and get to every niche, cover every possible genre, is great. It's hard, but it's great. And I'm really looking forward to being able to do more of this in the future There's so many great independently published games that are coming out. More and more games are going mainstream and getting more resources and being able to expand on what they already have. And it's really a great time to get into tabletop RPGs. There's so many options out there now. Whereas it used to just kind of be, Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer. So I think that's the entirety of my collection for the moment. I really hope you enjoyed and you took something away from this. Again, if you are a librarian and you want to kind of ask further questions, anything a little bit more specific, I am happy to answer questions. My email is samma, SAMMA, @phlib.org. And I tried to respond within a couple of days. Sometimes I get a little backlog working on other things. And if you are someone who just really enjoys tabletop games and want to see a collection in your own library, feel free to show this to librarians, give them my contact information, whatever you like. But I think this is a great way to engage people of all ages, and I know we're trying really hard to get more millennials in the door, older teens in the door, and I think this is a great way to encourage them to come in, see what we've got to offer, that we don't have just, fiction books and video games and DVDs. We have other things to offer them. So that's all. I might do another one later on different programs you could run. I'm still trying to get a program up and going. None of them have really stuck yet. I've tried 3, only one was successful so far. But I have some new outreach that I want to try with a new gaming store in the area and a really cool little bar that has board games and a great table for it. So I might try and do outreach first to get people to come in. But that's all. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the comments below. Email me. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up. And if you like the content, feel free to subscribe. I do vlogs on Wednesdays. They can either be work-related or, whatever I feel like talking about at the time. I do Let's Plays on Mondays and audiobooks on Fridays. So that's all. I hope you have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is, wherever you are, and I'll see you next time.